Welcome back to the Notcast. Welcome to 2023 and welcome to episode 260, where today I talk about a record that gets its 20th birthday this year. It only feels like 10 years. Controversial, hated, not very loved, not played live very often. It is Saint Anger by the Metallicas. And this is a divisive LP. Some people love it. Most people hate it. The people that have hated it probably haven't heard Lulu with Lou Reed and Metallica yet. And if they did, they'd have a new least favourite Metallica LP instead of Saint Anger. It was a very, very busy time to be a fan of the band. Awful lot of stuff happened. We also had the frankly almost unforgivable motion picture calamity that is Some Kind of Lobster there, which I will be talking about later on as well. So putting all my cards on the table, this period saw the release of the worst single original Metallica related song of all time out of the 168 or so that the band have released. It also saw what is, in my opinion, the release of my favourite Metallica album. Yes, you will be surprised to hear that Saint Anger is my favourite Metallica record. Now, I'm sure some of you are going, no, he's just being contrary. He's choosing a weird, obscure thing that nobody genuinely likes to prove a point. No, I really fucking love Saint Anger as an album. I know that it is not particularly good. The production is trash and terrible on it. And it is very, very sloppy from a technical point of view. But it was exactly what I needed at the time that it came out. Sometimes the world gives you what you need without you knowing that that's what you need. Saint Anger was exactly what I needed in 2003. In the same way that in 2017, when U2 released You're the Best Thing About Me, the world gave me a song that was everything that I needed without knowing that was what I needed. Saint Anger was the thing that really kind of just cut through everything else and went straight through to me. This is the album that I absolutely had to have in my life at that time. And it was released on the 5th of June, 2003. I have to do a little bit of history here, going back a teeny weeny bit into the album's history, thanks to the Metallica So What book that was also published around about the same time, which contains excerpts or best-ofs from all the band's various respective fan club publications. I wasn't a fan club member because being a fan club member cost £12 or so, and I didn't have £12. With 17th of January 2001, Jason Newsted left the band. He left the fucking band, as Lars says. And the period, both immediately before and immediately after, is covered in absolutely fascinating detail in the motion picture, Some Kind of Monster here. Which, aside from the 30 minutes where Jason actually told the cameraman to go out of the room and so he could tell the band that he was leaving, documents the period, both the immediate aftermath and the 2 or 3 years after Jason actually leaving the band. So absolutely fascinating. As far as I'm concerned, by the way, Some Kind of Monster is one of the very best rock documentaries of all time. It's up there with Dig and what's the other one that's absolutely amazing? There's lots of them. But Some Kind of Monster is absolutely one of the best ones ever. It's up there with The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, and Dig, which follows, I think, the Brian Jonestown Massacre. For the period after Jason left, the band moved to a studio called, I think, the Presidio, and they tried to record new material as a trio with their producer, Bob Rock, on bass. And there's an awful lot of stuff from the Presidio sessions that appears in this film. There is several short excerpts of songs, such as Temptation and Signs of the Cross and things like that. And they're all very generic, or as perhaps Lars would say, they're all fucking stock, man. Although obviously that sounds more Scottish than whichever country he is from. Danish, isn't he? He's Danish. And they're all tired, boring, unoriginal riffs by a band that's got no juice in them. They've got no vision. They've got no direction. They don't know what they want to be. Being in a band has become a job at this point. and their job is to write songs. And sometimes you just don't have the inspiration. When I look at things that I've written when I haven't been inspired, I normally can tell straight away that I wasn't feeling it, or that I didn't hold on to the initial idea that I had hold tight enough to be able to chip away all the bits of it that weren't great. Basically, when the band were doing the stuff in the Presidio, they were doing songs that weren't really good enough to be B-sides. And they're pretty awful, to be honest. And I agree with, I think, Tobin, who I think is Lars's dad, and just go delete that, because it's just not particularly good, a huge amount of that stuff. Not that that stopped the band from releasing the material, because the very worst song ever released by Metallica is on this album by the now forgotten nobody rapper Swizz Beatz, featuring presenting Ghetto Stories, and there's a track on here called We Did It Again, which is Metallica, Ja Rule and Swizz Beatz, and it features largely a Pro Tools session of a mostly instrumental Metallica song with somebody saying, just when you thought it was over, just when you thought it was done, yeah, 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 we did it again. Truly lyrics well worth throwing onto vinyl or CD to be immortalised forever in one of your most high-profile tracks, the equivalent of oral graffiti. The track We Did It Again by Metallica featuring Ja Rule and Swizz Beatz is fucking atrocious. It is the very worst thing that Metallica have ever committed to records, even worse than Lulu. It's dog shit bad. And to be honest, a huge chunk of that is down to the fact that the lyrics and the rapping is both, from a technical point of view, not particularly good, and from a lyrical point of view, absolutely ridiculously simplistic, to the point where I think it could have been written by an ant. So no, not a fan of that. And then at one point, as documented in this, James went to rehab for undisclosed addictions, and then when he came back from that a long time later, the band were then working only between noon and 4 p.m. And I think one of the reasons why Jason left the group was because James was very controlling about it. It was like, this is my thing, and nobody can get to wrest the power and control of the band from me and Lars. But the rest of the band found that it had become very restrictive. And I found that that degree of egotism, the thing that allowed James to go off and do his own solo things and sing on tracks by Corrosion of Conformity and Waylon Jennings and all that, but not to allow anybody else to do anything of any substantial note whatsoever, because they're diluting the fucking band, is pretty embarrassing, really. And the more you try to tighten your grasp around these, the more solar systems will slip through your fingers. Grand Moff Hetfield. So Jason left, and Jason leaving was the thing that needed to happen to prove to some of the other members of the band that the way in which the band had been working could not continue. It had to change. So the band effectively split up for a period of time. We have a period in the middle of some kind of monster, which is almost the band's having almost an existential crisis. There's a bit where Echo Brain, Jason's band, play, and Lars and Kirk are there watching them, and they're kind of going, are Echo Brain the future? Are Metallica done now? Is that it? Are we relevant? Do we matter anymore? And the short answer is they didn't really know, and they didn't have the confidence in their own songwriting abilities to be able to say so. They didn't know if James was coming back. So as an outsider looking into that, there were very few or very limited kind of updates as to around what the band was up to. And there wasn't really any news around what was going on. I heard that the band played a couple of small low-key shows. The band had a fan club session where fan club members played bass with them, and they jammed and did some stuff at the HQ, but that was it. And aside from that, the band was just recording, and it was, by the time Saint Anger came out, it was 6 years after the release of Reload, and Reload was a poor harvest. Those of you who've watched Notcast 243, I guess, will know that I'm not a huge fan of Reload. And Saint Anger, when it came out, was something that I don't think anyone was particularly expecting. There was lots of rumours going around. but the album itself is something very, very different. And so when it did come out, surprisingly, it went to #1 in 14 countries. It sold 417 copies in week 1 in America alone. Its worldwide sales are 6 million copies, which is a pretty amazing kind of result, really, all things considered. And for a record that's, I think, so individual and uncompromising in its approach, that's a pretty exciting and unexpected output to have. So let's be blunt about Saint Anger. Why it's not a great LP, but it's my favourite LP. The songs are built by committee. The band had forgotten how to write songs. They'd forgotten how to structure songs. They'd forgotten how to use melody and lyrics and riffs and things like that. And so there's lots of material on there, but it's a sound of somebody in an artistic crisis having to learn how to be Metallica again. So you can imagine, like, if you're an athlete and you break your ankle and you suddenly have to learn how to walk again, or you're the drummer from Def Leppard who's only got one arm and you have to remember how to play drums again, and you have to learn how to do it again. You have to learn how to be. This is the sound of Metallica learning how to walk and how to be Metallica again, and not quite sure exactly what it is. They've had a core, almost existential crisis that had torn down the way of life that they had established and the way the working relationships that they got used to, and we're starting again, casting themselves in a new mold. But it's almost like you're trying to draw yourself from memory and you're not quite sure exactly what you look like. So, for example, when you dream, and I'm guessing some of you dream, if you look in the mirror and then you look at yourself in the mirror in a dream, and then you kind of go, so that's the image of me that exists in my mind. Or if you look at a watch, what does the time say in that? Where are your dreams held? And that's where, from a psychological perspective, where your psyche is rooted to. So my dreams happen to a version of me that has hair, but lives in this house with these people and these cats that I live with. So, for example, that's kind of strange, because I look in the mirror and I know that's not me, because I haven't had hair for about 20 years. But when I dream, I have hair. It's really, really strange. Metallica are dreaming in this album. They are trying to forge a version of themselves based upon memory, and not fully succeeding with what it is. But it's absolutely fascinating to hear Metallica trying to be Metallica. So what happens when you forget how to write songs? What happens when you rebuild yourself and they end up, they're working on tiny chunks of music and then cut and pasting them? So, for example, there's no solos. There's very little in the way of tempo shifts in this album, in between songs. I think there's very clear tempo shifts in Frantic, maybe in Saint Anger, and maybe in some kind of Monster. But the rest of them are largely, it runs at the same pace all the way through. So that traditional Metallica song structure that you would have, which is basically progressive thrash with multiple time signatures, doesn't really exist on this LP. I think the other thing is that we've got an absence of melody. So the vocal melodies are very short, they're very hard, they're very clipped, and the guitar and the solos and the other riffs which are in it are very short. It's almost like Metallica covering the Ramones, but doing 8-minute Ramones songs. Because the thing about the lyrics that we've got for Frantic, they don't have the, and then if I could have these days back to blah 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 blah, life is back on track, and tick 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 tock tock tock, there's not very much in the way of these long vocal melodies which you would have established with Metallica. You can't really sing songs like Frantic or Saint Anger. They're more almost a kind of metal rap form, or Ramones, very short clipped vocal melodies and guitar riffs. So they're not extended, they don't carry notes out. You can't whistle these songs unless you've got an iron lung attached to you and an oxygen mask. The other thing that we've got is most of these songs on this album are not built for live performance. You think about the songs on the album that have been played live during the accompanying tour. There were some shows where the band only played one song off Saint Anger live, and sometimes it was Frantic. They played Saint Anger a lot of times. They played Dirty Window a fair bit. Some Kind of Monster they played twice. I don't think they ever played Invisible Kid. They played Shoot Me Again, I think, twice. I think Some Kind of Monster twice. Sweet Amber, I think they played once. Purify once. The Unnamed Feeling maybe 14 times. I think it was 2007 before they played All Within My Hands. Most of the songs on this album have not been played on a regular basis since 2004. And when you saw a typical Saint Anger gig, and I saw 2 Saint Anger gigs, they played 2 songs off the album at each one of those shows. In fact, for what is my favourite Metallica LP, it's the Metallica LP that I've seen the least number of songs from performed. I've only seen 3 songs from this album performed live. I've seen Frantic performed 4 times, Saint Anger once, and Dirty Window once, and that's it. So I've only seen songs from Saint Anger performed 6 times in my life, which is pretty surprising, really, all things considered. And I think what we had is a case of the band trying to rebuild what they were. First thing I will say is, as an album, it is a bold, beautiful, and brash statement. It is, from a technical point of view, fucking appalling. The drum production on it, as people have said, with that all those videos of a guy playing on tin cans, is amateurish. Nobody should settle for such appalling drum production ever, and from a band that had some of the best drum sounds of all time. So that the snare drum sound that you would have on the Metallica Black album is one of the best snare sounds I've ever heard by anybody ever anywhere in the history of the universe. And Saint Anger is absolutely one of the worst. It feels like it's a 64K MP3 of some guy playing in his garage. It's atrocious. And then from a purely technical point of view as well, the songs are not well constructed. So I went through and I remixed Saint Anger for my own entertainment. I fed the album into my my software. I tried to recreate the album, and I thought, well, what if I take out all the repetition, if I take out all the cut and paste bars and verses that you've got, the bits where you take a 6-minute song and you turn it into an 8-minute song by just going, well, we'll just copy those 8 bars and we'll drop them in there, and then we'll copy these 4 bars and we'll put them in there. There's an awful lot of place marking in this album. There's an awful lot of basically corridor loading screens, or extended kind of scenery sections where the songs don't need those extra bits in. They absolutely don't, because there's no variation. And you could take 4 bars out of 2 minutes 30 seconds into, let's say, Invisible Kid, and you could drop it into 6 minutes of Invisible Kid, and nobody would notice, because what you're looking at in terms of a song structure is your standard intro, verse, chorus, instrumental bit, verse, chorus, instrumental bit, guitar solo, and then you go back to, we'll just repeat the intro, but we'll put a little bit of over the top of it, and then we'll put an extra verse in there, but we might just chop and change some of the vocals around. Okay, so we'll do that. Then what we'll do is that we will take the section from the beginning of the song, we'll put it at the end, but then we'll futz it ever so slightly, and you end up with a 4-minute song that's suddenly 8.5 minutes in length. There's a fantastic example of how this sloppy production is to the detriment of the songs, because the single of Some Kind of Monster contains a 4.5-minute radio edit with proper drums that, by the way, is easily 10 times better than the LP version of Some Kind of Monster. So if you listen to the studio album of Saint Anger, it's not particularly good. I think what I will say is that it's basically very, 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 very expensive demos, and that's all anyone should ever think about the Saint Anger album as being, is a very, very expensive set of demos. If you bought Saint Anger when it first came out, by the way, there was a special DVD called the Saint Anger Rehearsals that came with the CD, and this DVD features the actual then existent lineup of Metallica, which featured obviously Robert Trujillo on bass, playing live in their studio. The Saint Anger Rehearsals on the DVD are the definitive version of the album, but even that version of the album, the one that's the DVD that's on the limited edition of the LP, firstly, that should be the version that everybody knows, because it's better. The drum sound isn't so absolutely atrocious, and it actually sounds real, as opposed to 4 guys playing 4 separate things at 4 separate times, often years apart. And even then, the DVD is a compilation of multiple takes and attempts at each one of the songs, which, bearing in mind that some of the songs that are on the DVD have never been played live by the band. I think particularly, I'm thinking maybe you know, My World or Invisible Kid has not been played often, if at all. You're then kind of looking at a live release, which for something that was never live, if that makes sense. It's a live in the studio version of the album, and it's easily the best version of the record. And of course I will post a link to that down there in the comments box. And there was also, when the band played live, there was a sense that the band didn't necessarily have the commitment to the material that you would expect a band touring a new album to have. As I've said before, on all of the shows of the tour, the band played maybe 3 songs a night from Saint Anger at most. Normally 2, sometimes 1, and one of those songs was almost always, if not always, Frantic, alongside Saint Anger. And Saint Anger itself, the title track, sometimes got swapped out and replaced with Dirty Window. And what we had was an album that had been more built around a theme than around songs. It was based around a groove as opposed to melodies. It had poor production, and the Pro Tools editing on Saint Anger is sloppy as hell. It's amateurish, because what you'll do is, as I've mentioned before, the band take 8 bars of a song, and they literally just lift it up, copy it, and drop it somewhere else into the same song, and then they extend the song out beyond its natural length. But what you end up doing is, when they cut on those sections, is that you end up having like cymbal crashes or hi-hats or something being cut off kind of literally mid-play. So you've got like that, as opposed to going when you've got, and it doesn't sound good. It sounds like, you know, cheap Photoshop. Now maybe that's what the band were aiming to do there, as a, you know, a representation of the band's artistic space. It's accurate and valid, but it's, from a technical point of view, awful. Nobody would let it happen. It's almost as bad as the cover art to Iron Maiden's Dance of Death, that was also released in 2003, by the way. If you look at the cover art for Dance of Death, what you'll end up looking at is people that look like they're very clearly kind of produced in Photoshop. Actually, I'll go and get a copy of it now for you. So here it is. This is Iron Maiden's Dance of Death. I wasn't expecting to go there, but here we are. And if you look here, what you'll see is the baby is hovering in midair, standing on the dog. The gymnast there has got what clearly looks to be either a broken or hyperextended leg, and you've got a whole bunch of poorly rendered, incomplete bits. None of it makes any sense. It's some kind of Escher painting turned into some weird 3D AI version of an Iron Maiden cover. It's an atrocious piece of artwork that fails every bit of technical knowledge or competency that you would expect to have. And when it was submitted by the artist, it was submitted as a proof of concept as opposed to an actual final bit of cover art, and yet somehow Iron Maiden went, fuck it, we'll go with that. And this is the same kind of amateurish, sloppy behaviour that we've got with Saint Anger. Is, from a technical point of view, it's a bag of shit. The drum production is appalling. I think it took 15 minutes to mic up the drums, and they didn't even silence some of the drum tracks. So, for example, at the beginning of Some Kind of Monster, you'll hear the throb of the bass, but the throb of the bass is causing the cymbals and hi-hats to just a little bit, and they haven't silenced that at all. It's just part of the ambient sound of the room, and it's just bad. You know, if you were playing a gig to 120 people and you had a drum sound like Saint Anger, you'd be appalled. And yet somehow they stuck it on a 6 million selling album. Yes, I know, going on about the drum sound, get over it. Well, frankly, some people did. They re-recorded the whole of the album themselves. They put it up on YouTube. It sounds so much better. It's actually ridiculous. But there we are. Let's go through the songs on the album, song by song, bite by bite. And we start off with Frantic, which is the first single, more correctly, the second single that was released from the album. Frantic is a great track. It's a classic. It's the one track from the album that I've seen the band play more than any other track. It got a 12-inch release here in the UK, backed with the Uncle remix of Frantic, and it got a couple of CDs as well. So the 2 CD singles, by the way, of Frantic were backed with respectively versions of Blackened and Harvester of Sorrow, and on this one, No Remorse and Welcome Home Sanitarium. And the strange and unusual thing about the CD singles is that for every country in Europe that the CD singles were released in, the live tracks were recorded at different festivals. So, for example, and I'll quickly go through it here, the Danish version was recorded at Roskilde, the German version at Rock am Ring, the French version in Paris, the Belgian version at Rockwerter and Fields of Rock, the Spanish version at Dr. Music, whatever that is, and the Italian version at a festival called Imola Jamming Festival. In the UK and the rest of the world, we've got the versions recorded at the Donington Download Monsters of Rock Festival, which I didn't go to because my first Metallica show was the Reading Festival in August 2003. And Frantic I think it's a great Metallica track. It's one of the best Metallica tracks that there is. I wish they'd play it live more often. Hell, I'd be quite happy if they played every track from Saint Anger live, but I know they won't do that. But it's got this powerful, propelling, compulsive rhythm. And stripped from the production and just listening to the song as it is, Frantic is unquestionably, I think, one of Metallica's finest songs. Most people disagree with me. Most people are wrong, but that's okay. It's a broad world. Not everybody can like Seek and Destroy. And whilst I remember, I should actually go for the title track from the album, because frankly that's where all the action happens, or where everything started. So the title track from the album, Saint Anger itself, was released as a single, 2 CD singles and a 7-inch in the countries that had CD singles. This is the Japanese CD single that features I think 4 of the 5 respective B-sides that were on there. So this features as a B-side Commando, Today You're Loved, Tomorrow the World, Now I Want to Sniff Some Glue, and We're a Happy Family. There was also those 4 tracks on the B-side are cover versions of the Ramones, which were recorded for their compilation album, We're a Happy Family. On the We're a Happy Family compilation release, which I have as a CDR in another room, which I've totally forgotten about, we had a version of, I think, 53rd and 3rd, which the band did play live occasionally. I'm absolutely convinced, by the way, that there is a track that's only on the 7-inch of Saint Anger, but I did just check in Discogs. I can't find it, and I can't be bothered to look for it. But no, Saint Anger as a title track actually was super, super important. The idea behind Saint Anger as a title track is it follows on from, I think, the idea that was originally posited in Rise by Public Image Limited, the idea of anger being an energy, and you can direct and turn that energy into something that's a positive thought. When the band play live, sometimes James Hetfield talked about how we're all the same family, and we all have the same size soul, and what we need to do is to turn that anger and that aggression into a positive force that is released sometimes inside the mosh pits. And it's an absolutely great song. I mean, I love it. And from a lyrical perspective, I mean, obviously there's that idea around anger as an energy, but also an idea about a righteous and liberating fury. So if you're angry about something, what you're generally doing is you're saying, well, actually, I've got expectations around how the world should be, or what the world should look like, or how people should behave, and they aren't following those expectations. And anger sometimes comes from almost a form of wanting to improve the world and the state of the world and how things are within it, and then directing that anger towards making things feel better, more equal, fairer, or more just. It's not always right, it's not always accurate, but what it is it's always there. And, you know, I get angry when the train gets cancelled, because I'm like, I've paid you to do a service and you're not providing the service, and I'm annoyed about that. And of course, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know I frequently get annoyed about that. I try not to these days. But it's a positive state to be in, is to look at something and go, it could be better, it should be better, and I'm striving for it to be better. And that's kind of where that kind of anger comes from, I think. So Saint Anger, super important song, and I think it's really good that it's the title track from the LP. Lars did want it to be called Frantic, which doesn't make any sense. Frantic kind of implies that you're kind of scrabbling around and you don't really know what you're doing, and you're just kind of rah, 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 rah. You know, like the Fizz gig in I think Dark Crystal or something, is that you've got no direction and no rationale and no logic to what you're doing. Saint Anger is more going, you're going to take that power, that energy, that anger, and focus it into a direction. So I think when he sings, I want my anger to be healthy and I want my anger to be me, for example, in the song, it becomes actually super important to understanding what the song is around. So the lyric around where it goes, I want my anger to be healthy, I want my anger just for me, and I need my anger not to control, and I want my anger to be me, and I need to set my anger free. And then you kind of go, right, so that's a lyric that's very clearly about actually using the power of frustration, the power of annoyance, and using that and directing it in a positive way. You can argue that a lot of the lyrics on the album are very, very geared towards or born from therapy and from rehab. So, for example, when James was going through rehab, he went through some therapy sessions to try and understand the things that were drivers around his addiction. The band also brought in the notorious Phil Towell, who's, I think, a performance coach management person who was paid quite, I think, £40,000 a month, it was mentioned in the film, to help the band move towards working successfully. And I think he'd done some work with Rage Against the Machine, and I think some professional sports teams, to try and make sure that people's relationships and their egos weren't actually being unhealthy and damaging the positive elements that they had. So again, they need their anger to be healthy and they want it to set them free, but not to control them. And that's where that comes from. There are some hilarious, cringy moments in Some Kind of Monster when Phil Towell is talking about the band, and he said they said a ridiculous mission statement when they start off the record, saying we come to create our album of life and to reflect upon the journeys that we've been on and the stories that we have to tell. And it's like, no, man, you just need to get in there and just scream it fucking out. That's how it works. But then there's a bit where Phil writes "zone it" on a bit of paper, and he puts it on the door, and you come in and you go, zone it? What do you mean? Be in the zone or something? And there's a point where actually you're starting to kind of just wrap up reality in so many different abstract concepts that you lose track of the ground beneath your feet. And there's a bit where Phil offers lyrics, and I have no idea what those lyrics are, and I don't think they're in the film. But the idea is, dude, you're the fucking therapist, okay? Your job is to make sure the band make the music, not to write the lyrics for the band. And James is like, do you want to sing it? And it's kind of like, yeah, dude, you've overstepped your mark there. You've exceeded your authority in the band. Your role is to get the band to work. Your role is not to be part of the band. So I'm kind of watching it and going, there's somebody there that themselves has, even though they've got maybe the tools and the talent and the ability to help the band achieve what it wants to do, has lost grasp of where their position in this as well, and has started to see themselves as a creative entity when clearly you're not. You're the band's therapist. So yeah, there you go. That's Saint Anger, the title track. Third track on the album is Some Kind of Monster, which was obviously the title of the film, which I've just been talking about. It was released as an 8-track EP with a remix by Bob Rock on it. And Some Kind of Monster is, I think it's a song about Metallica. It's a song where the lyrics are kind of like talking about how the band itself has become a monster which has started to control and define some of the things which the band are up to, really. So the lyric in Some Kind of Monster, which is about, this is the cloud that swallows trust, this is the black that uncolours us, this is the face that you hide from, this is the mask that comes undone. And it's all around, the thing, the existence of a monster, a creature that creates and defines and controls. And sometimes you say that's anger, but also it's Metallica as a beast, a huge corporate behemoth that around squillions and squillions of dollars, and hundreds of thousands of millions of people that the band have played to over the years. That's a monster, and the monster lives and it needs to be fed. We then have Dirty Window, which has been played live by the band a number of times, and I've seen them play it live, and banger live, putting it technically. the idea of, who do I think I am? I look out my window and I see it's all gone wrong. My court is in session, and now I slam my gavel down. I drink from the cup of denial. I'm judging the world from my throne. And it's a very interesting lyric, which kind of is talking about, how your perception of your reality is defined by what's immediately in front of your eyes. And if the window is dirty, you can't see the complete picture of everything. I may be projecting here, but I think these lyrics on this album are very good. They just teeter just on the right side of ridiculous, as opposed to perhaps some of the other ones which are happening. We have Invisible Kid, track 5. And Invisible Kid, to me, I think at least, is a song that really talks about staying in touch with the inner person that you once were. So if you were, we're all, well, irrespective of your age now, you either are or have been at one point a young child, a kid, 14, 15, somebody that people have looked at, not necessarily realised who you are or seen you for who you are, or recognised that appropriately. I was at one point in my life the invisible kid that nobody really saw. I was just this 14-year-old that had no money and no power and no influence and no experience, and was just invisible. And that's what the Invisible Kid, I think, is really all about. Track 6 is My World, and My World is a fascinating song, I think, to really talk about. There's this, and it's fascinating because there's a scene in this where James is singing recording the vocal for My World, and he's sat there on a couch, and there's a kid that's on his lap, and the kid's all over him, and he's sat there trying to sing and going, "It's my world and you can't have it. It's my world, you can't have it. It's my world." And I'm kind of going, dude, it's not your world. You're not the king of your domain here. You've got a kid sat on your lap that's stopping you from opening your throat up completely. It's not your world. And there's something inherently kind of contradictory about that position in the film. And even the opening line, "The motherfucker's got in my head trying to make me somebody else instead." And you just kind of go, well, there's a whole bunch of psychotherapy that's going on in these lyrics, and some of them are really fascinating, and some of them are kind of a little bit navel gazing. Maybe the lyrics are a bit too close to the band or to their experiences, in the way that, for example, I don't necessarily want to be reminded of certain things that have happened in my life, heartbreak or whatever, and so I avoid the places, and I avoid the people, and I avoid the music that I was listening to. And you kind of think, for example, if you're in a band and you sing a lyric and you have an enormously big success, but you end up kind of going, well, actually, every time I sing that song, I relive all the emotions that I went through when I went through a divorce or a funeral or something. And it's like, you don't want to be singing that necessarily. And it's absolutely, it's very difficult for someone to sing. So maybe, some of these lyrics around, for example, "I bite my tongue trying not to shoot back, no compromise, my heart won't pump the other way." And then you kind of go, all right, so maybe there's something about, the circumstances in that life, that stuff that's happening, that the band are trying to move through, and they don't necessarily play the songs live because they don't want to relive them, or perhaps they think that other songs are better, and then we've got The Unnamed Feeling, which was the fourth and last song, I think, or maybe the third song to be released as a single. Is it any good? No, it's absolutely not single material. It's difficult, awkward, not particularly good. There's nothing about The Unnamed Feeling that to me goes, that's a goddamn hit, because it isn't. It's one of the worst singles, or the least single-like tracks that's ever been released. Now in the UK, The Unnamed Feeling had a CD EP that had the same B-sides as were on the American Some Kind of Monster single. So I bought the 12-inch picture disc version of The Unnamed Feeling instead, and here it is, the uncut 12-inch, which is backed with a live version of Leper Messiah. By the way, it's the picture disc there of The Unnamed Feeling. But the Unnamed Feeling also had the CD release. In Germany, it had a 3-inch CD backed with the first CD release of the Uncle remix of Frantic. And the Uncle remix of Frantic, by the way, is an instrumental track that the band used a number of times in other places and in other areas. Oops, that's fallen out of the broken CD case there. Proof that it's live, kids. The Uncle reconstruction of Frantic got a CD released digitally on this. An instrumental version of it was released on a couple of the Uncle mixtapes. And there was also the in Australia there was the CD single of the Unnamed Feeling, which contained 3 bonus live tracks that were recorded in I think it was the Sydney Big Day Out festival at the Gold Coast 2004, and the band had a competition to design the single artwork for the Unnamed Feeling CD single, and that CD artwork was, I think, replicated in the Unnamed Artist competition. So there was a poster there which features the artwork that did go onto the Unnamed Feeling, plus the 4 runners-up there on a poster alongside the names of all of the particular entrants who I think have produced artwork for the single. It was a good way of engaging the fan base, and the B-sides feature live versions of Dirty Window, Master of Puppets and Battery, so a good selection of live tracks from the period, as well as on the Unnamed Feeling CD single and the Some Kind of Monster CD single in the US. You've got live versions recorded in Paris of Four Horsemen, Damage Incorporated, Leper Messiah, Motor Breath, Ride the Lightning, and Hit the Lights. All the early stuff, which is a good listen. I think there's 2 more tracks on the album now. There's Purify, which wasn't played live very often. And then there's All Within My Hands, that wasn't played live until 2007, and it was first played in an acoustic format. The whole kind of sense of the album, and the reason why I think this is my favourite Metallica album and not the best Metallica album, is because even from the production all the way through to the songwriting, is that it's fierce, it's uncompromising, it's addressing things around anger and fury and thwarted expectations and heartbreak and feelings, and it's trying to focus all of those into a positive place. And that's exactly where I was in 2001 and 2000. And so this is the album that really, had it come out in 2000, I would have played that to death. It would have been my album of the year, but it came out 3 years later, when my life was a heck of a lot better and I was in a stable relationship with somebody that wasn't batshit fucking crazy, which made a nice change. But this album is my favourite Metallica album because it captures this sense of both, I think, claustrophobia and a sense of directed fury and anger, you know, working very, very hard to achieve a certain set of outcomes and directing all of one's energy towards achieving those set of outcomes. And that's the thing that comes through all of this, is that they're working through the waves of some huge and unspecified, unnamed feeling, this unidentifiable foe, whatever that might be it depression or heartbreak or finance or compulsion or addiction or whatever it is. It's the sound of a fierce and unrelenting uphill struggle, a triumph of determination and a battle of will against a foe, whatever that foe might be. So that's why it's my favourite album, even though from a technical point of view it's a piece of shit. From a songwriting point of view, it's not particularly strong. It captures this very unique, rarefied moment of absolute determination to overcome the odds, whatever those odds might be. The band went on tour and the album came out. They played a lot of shows. They played a couple of fan club shows, 4 fan club shows at the San Francisco Fillmore, and then they played a lot of television shows to start off with. They played their first proper public show at the Rock am Ring Festival in 2003, which was broadcast on television. This is the first proper Metallica public show with the new lineup of Rob Trujillo, and it's surprisingly slick. It features Frantic and Saint Anger, but you can clearly see when you're watching it that you're seeing a band that's not 100% confident that they are actually going to achieve what they think they're going to achieve. They're going to try it, but they haven't yet become Metallica. They're nearly there. It's fascinating to watch this particular show. And as the band played more and more shows over time, it became more and more apparent that the band were getting better at playing live. So they played the Roskilde Festival. Here's a bootleg CD of Roskilde, which features the radio broadcast. They did a whole bunch of festival shows. They played 3 shows in one day in Paris. One of the shows was released as the Liberty, Equality and Fraternity live release, which was released following the horrific terrorist incident at the Bataclan. This was recorded at the Paris Bataclan in June the 11th, 2003. Some of the other songs from Paris were released on the Unnamed Feeling single as well, so you were able to get a very good selection there. But it seems that the band weren't quite confident enough to release high-profile live releases in the way that they had done previously, leaving the live tracks for the B-sides and not releasing the standard, sell-through VHS, DVD, live thing, which they had done for their other tours. They also play festivals and tours all over the world. I saw them at the Reading Festival and later on at London's now demolished Earl's Court on the 20th of December 2003, which really doesn't seem like 20 years ago now, because it isn't, it's only 19. They released the Some Kind of Monster film into the cinemas, which was absolutely fascinating car crash watching. They released Metallica the videos to cash in on the last dying days of DVD as a viable format, with some 5:1 mixes. There was also a book, This Monster Lives, written by Joe Berlinger with Greg Milner. This is effectively the book which tells the filmmaker's story of making Some Kind of Monster, and you really need to read this in conjunction with Some Kind of Monster to get a sense of how everything really happens, and the constraints that run it. This is an absolutely fascinating book. If you are a Metallica fan, run to get this and read it, and then get an extra layer of complexity and information relating to what happened with the album and the making of it. The band brought their tour to a close in late 2004, but they went back into festivals in 2004. Here is a bootleg DVD of Rock in Rio, which actually is in Lisbon in 2004. And then they brought the tour to a close in 2004, late 2004, with a radio session. And Metallica became a fierce proposition as a live band at this time. They had effectively made Saint Anger with the idea of being able to tour that as a new album and to build good working relationship, to reset the band as something new and different that was going to be viable and was going to work and was going to be successful. And it did work, and it then put the band, the new lineup of the band, to the extent that they were then able to write new material, which they were then started working on. And they played 2 of the songs live. So they played I think the other new song, a song called Vulture. They played the new song, which contains parts of The End of the Line and other parts of some of the other songs which appeared later on Death Magnetic. And they also played a track called The Other New Song, which has never appeared officially, but was played 4 or 5 times in 2006 and 2007. If you want it, the bootleg DVD of Live in Seoul is the best place to get it. In 2006, they played Master of Puppets for its 20th anniversary. Here's the bootleg DVD from Rock am Ring, which features the live set as broadcast on MTV, but it doesn't feature the new song. But you'll have to pick up the new songs elsewhere. But that is for the episode where I talk about the 2008 album, Death Magnetic. In conclusion, it's taken me 49 minutes to get to this point. I'm going to quickly wrap up and say that I know that Saint Anger is, from a technical point of view, sloppily produced and mixed. I know that from a songwriting point of view, it's the sound of an embryonic band learning how to be Metallica again. It's by no standards the best Metallica album, but it is 100% my favourite Metallica album. It gave me exactly what I needed when I needed it, because the period when it came out, which was 20 years ago, the immediate period before that was possibly the worst years of my life, and the hardest, and a year where I could have easily collapsed had I not had the determination and strength of will to just keep fucking going throughout everything. And this album is the sound of the band doing exactly the same. The determination and strength of will to not be defeated by the outside influences that, whether intentionally or not, were causing them harm, but to keep going and to come out the other side of whatever hell that they were experiencing. This album sounded to me like the struggle that I had had in the 2 or 3 years previous to the release of this LP. And I'm very glad that it exists. It has a very, very special place in my heart, and it is my favourite Metallica LP. Right, thank you for that. That wraps it up for this. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I've got lots of bits of paper and all things all lined up for those. Again, if you've got an idea around something you'd be interested to hear me talk about, do put it in the comments. If you haven't, don't. That's totally cool too. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. And I will see you all, hopefully, quite soon. See you later. Bye.